So sometimes I'm looking at the screen and there's a bit of freezing going on. So yeah, we are recording, and the webinar will be available in the secure area on the Oscar Kilo website afterwards for anyone to go back and visit it. As Anna goes through a presentation today, if you've got any questions, do feel free just to pop them into the chat bar, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. I can't promise we'll get to everything, but we'll cover as much as we can at the end of the session. So I will leave it there for now, Anna, and hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Good morning, everybody. As Yvonne has said, I'm Anna Earle, and I'm the registered nutritionist with NutriVital. And this is the third of our 4 webinars in the Feed Your Body Clock series. And today we're looking specifically at how we eat, and we're really focusing on the relationship between stress and digestion, and also about managing your food intake through greater awareness of your hunger and your appetite. So I'm just going to share some slides with you. Here we go. So if you're joining us for the first time today and you haven't yet seen the first 2 webinars from this series, part 1 covered what I believe to be the fundamental element of nutrition that impacts your overall health, and that is balancing your blood sugar. So if your energy levels are erratic and you regularly experience cravings and fatigue, checking that you're managing your energy intake to support your blood sugar could be a really beneficial place for you to start. And it's also key to reducing your risk of type 2 diabetes. So particularly if you've been told you are pre-diabetic and you've not yet watched that 1-hour open access webinar on the Oscar Kilo website, then I would invite you to try and make time for that. And then part 2, we looked at your food timings, eating around the clock, and how that health-wise affects your digestion, your metabolism, and amongst other issues can also impact your weight management. So those were the first 2 parts, and today we're talking about mindful eating and the health benefits of taking the stress out of eating. So the aim of today is going to be those 2 key areas. We're looking at the link with stress and digestion, and then how to manage our hunger and appetite through greater awareness of what we're eating and when we're eating. So why do I think it's important to include a talk on mindful eating in our Feed Your Body Clock programme? Well, when I think back to my time as a police officer, I recall that stereotypical image of balancing a bag of chips on my lap whilst my crew member drove on blue lights to our next job. And I didn't give a second thought as to how that might be impacting and affecting my health. It seems pretty obvious now, but at the time, that might have been our only opportunity to eat something during an 8-hour response shift. So eating on the go was absolutely the norm. And I've been researching and collating some more recent data from police officers in a variety of roles. And in the health and nutrition questionnaire, I ask, how much do you think your food choices and habits affect your performance at work? And the common responses are, I feel sluggish after eating, I feel bloated, I crave sugar. And about 3/4 of responses stated that unhealthy treats keep me going after dealing with a stressful incident. And there are specific issues that I'm hoping to get you thinking about today to recognise those patterns of behaviour. So it'd be really helpful to understand the challenges that you face with meal breaks at work. So I'm going to ask you to type in the answers to 3 questions, and then we'll look to share those in a couple of slides' time. So those questions are, how often do you have a fixed meal break away from your vehicle or your desk if you're desk-based? Question 2 is, on average, how long would that break be? And then question 3, how often do you have the opportunity to prepare? So for example, just to heat up, rather than prepare probably from scratch. Sit, eat and digest food during your working day or shift. So if you could type those answers to those 3 questions, that'd be really helpful. So I'm just going to pause there for a few seconds whilst you consider those. Okay, and as those answers are coming in, there are 2 further questions that I'd just like you to consider just to yourself. They're slightly more personal questions. So question 4 is, how often do you eat without registering what you've eaten? So that's just for you to consider to yourself rather than sharing in the chat box for now. How often do you eat without registering what you've eaten? And question 5, do you experience any uncomfortable gut symptoms after eating? And that's just 2 questions for you to consider for yourself. And when I ask you to consider the different states of hunger and what triggers us to eat, I'm looking at the issues that are being raised in your feedback and the impact on your health. So we are going to touch on eating as an emotional reaction, as so many people say they do eat unhealthily in order to deal with the stressful situations at work. And so we're going to be touching on eating as an emotional reaction to dealing with those negative experiences. And it's a behavior that some people don't even realize they're adopting, yet it can really impact your energy, your heart health, and your weight. But I realize that emotional eating is a sensitive subject. So if you feel that we're tipping into what might be for you disordered eating, that is outside of my training, but there are people qualified to provide specialist support. And so if you want to contact me directly after this webinar, I will be able to signpost you to some individual specialist support. So scientific research reports that one of the health impacts on shift workers is a greater risk of gastrointestinal conditions, so uncomfortable gut symptoms. For anyone interested in some further reading, this is one paper that I study that really highlights the health challenges regarding shift work and food timing. And as we covered in our last webinar, this is believed to be partly due to that disruptive pattern of eating at different times of the day and night, which can be out of balance with our digestive hormones, but also due to having to grab something to eat within very short windows of opportunity, as well as your choice of food that can accompany that unpredictable nature of your work. So often the pre-packed and takeaway food being a common option, without having the luxury of time and space to prepare your own meals. And then add to that, if you work in an emotive or highly charged environment, such as the emergency services, you may regularly approach your allocated meal break in a state of heightened stress. So let's look first of all at the relationship between stress and digestion. And stress is very much linked to gastrointestinal disorders such as irritable bowel syndrome and unexplained ongoing indigestion. So we're going to look at the body's stress response and what happens to you when you are in a state of stress. So this is the NutriVival Optimal Health Flower that I introduced in our first talk, and how balancing these 5 health areas makes sense. So if we go clockwise around the flower from stress, we've got stress, exercise, nutrition, sleep, and emotional balance. And if we can try and balance those to make optimal us, that makes sense. And all of these areas interconnect. And today we're just focusing on the links between this triad of stress, digestion, and mindfulness, aiming to balance these 3 areas of your health, and then discuss some techniques to help you promote your own health and well-being, possibly to recognise and address symptoms that may have been niggling for a while, and to support your weight management if that is relevant to you. So to get you thinking about identifying root causes of symptoms and the complex overlap of our bodily systems, picture this analogy. It's from a psychotherapist called Dr. Richard Schwartz, and he gives an illustration of you driving your car, and the red warning light comes on your dashboard, informing you that there is a problem somewhere. So what do you do to fix the problem? Are you going to just stick something over that red light so that you can't see it flashing anymore, so it's fine? Or maybe disconnect it to stop it flashing. There, problem solved. Or maybe you might look under the bonnet, either yourself or at a garage, and try and work out what's causing the problem and look to rectify it. So thinking of that in terms of stress-related digestive symptoms, consider what are stress triggers for you. And I'm going to share some simple techniques that really can be beneficial in supporting your digestive function and look to help you better process your food without those unpleasant after effects of bloating and wind and constipation and heartburn and so on. So here's a quick recap of your body's stress response. So any perceived stress on the body initiates the same response, whether it's real and imminent, which in your role it may well be, whether it's imagined, whether it's caused from long-term anxiety or by assaults on the body from excessive sugar, fat, alcohol, caffeine, drugs. These stressors all trigger our stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, and their main function is for survival. So the body, first of all, perceives the stress through surveillance, through your senses. You assess that stressor and then you respond. And this can all happen in a split second. But essentially, your body's resources, so your nutrients and your energy to survive, are prioritized. So you switch, whether that's actively or subconsciously, into fight or flight mode. And priority is given to your organs and muscles that are going to maximize that opportunity for survival. And they will minimize energy to functions that at that time are not deemed essential. So your digestion, reproduction, rest and repair. Not now. I need everything I've got to either run away or stay in flight. So here on the image, you can see that in the stress response, the heart starts to beat faster, our lungs start to work harder, our pupils dilate in our eyes, and our muscles are activated, become more tense, and we've got the energy from the blood pumping energy and resources to those areas. And the areas relating to digestion, so our saliva in our mouth and our stomach function and our bowel movements, that all slows down. That's not a priority for now. So relating that to different roles in policing, whether you are chasing a suspect, dealing with a traumatic road traffic accident, waking up every hour worrying you've missed your alarm for your early turn, or stressing over a complex court file. Your body triggers that same stress response, releasing the hormones cortisol and adrenaline, and not hormones that are going to promote digestion. So after the stressor has passed, your nervous system is designed to acknowledge the end of the danger, and your heightened state of alert should find rebalance, switching off those stress hormones and tipping the balance of your nervous system the other way to put you into a more relaxed state, designed for rest, repair and digest, like a seesaw. But what if the stressor hasn't passed? What if you're still worrying about an ongoing issue with your boss, daily issues with your children, the long to-do list, or your stack of bills waiting for your attention, plus the processed convenience food due to lack of time to prepare your own? Those stress hormones continue to pump through your blood, and those corresponding functions will also remain in play, that heightened state of alert. But now you're told it's time for your meal break. You're still buzzing from all the tasks that you've been dealing with. Plus your email inbox urgently needs your attention. So rather than just having a break, going to sit, to rest and digest, you're going to plow through all of those whilst throwing something down your neck, something that you barely register and can hardly recall tasting afterwards. That's not rest and digest. So we're just going to pause there for a moment, and I'm going to ask either Yvonne or Jo to share some of your challenges around eating. So those responses to those 3 questions.
Yeah, there's a bit of a mix, Anna. There's quite a lot that are sort of very rarely for the first question, maybe 15 minutes for how long. There's some that get that every day. Just a mix really of everything as you kind of expect, and yeah, maybe half the time. So yeah, a mixture of everything really in terms of what people are getting.
Okay, all right, thank you. So it kind of sort of highlights that we're not given that hours lunch break that you might get in other industries, in other jobs, in other roles. You might be given that fixed meal break to go away, to sit, to socialize a little bit, have a break away from your screen or from your radio, to actually go and actually switch from fight or flight into rest and digest. That is much more conducive to healthy digestion. So this is going to be one of the greatest challenges in your different roles in policing. So how on earth do you switch into that calmer state, ready for your intake of food, with the reality of the 24/7 roles that you're in, and having to, respond to the communities that you work in. Even remembering to have a drink, obviously, during that period can be quite challenging. So you may have to eat when you're allocated a break, regardless of whether you are hungry. So you may not be particularly in tune with your natural metabolism. You may not necessarily respond to your hunger hormones. You may not think, I'm actually feeling quite hungry, it's time for me to eat. You may just be told, this is your time to eat, you've now got 15 minutes, go away and eat. So it's no great surprise that the food that you have wolfed down, barely touching your lips, doesn't now sit very well. So what is the impact of eating whilst in that stressed state? Well, those IBS type symptoms of burping and belching, bloating, indigestion, wind and constipation, they are really common effects from poor digestion. They're sometimes caused by larger particles of food that haven't been properly chewed and broken down because we're wolfing things down so quickly, and so they're traveling along our gastrointestinal tracts, and they can start to ferment in the gut and cause various different issues. And food that is swallowed and not chewed to mush in your mouth also means that you're not absorbing the nutrients from your food properly. So you might be eating some delicious, nutritious food, but if it's not being broken down properly initially in your mouth, then it can pass through you without actually having the opportunity for your body to fully absorb all those nutrients. It may aggravate food sensitivities from an inflamed gut, become prone to stomach upsets and infections. And then to manage all of those symptoms, you might become reliant on your antacids, your Gaviscon, or be recommended stomach acid suppressing medications, so PPIs, maybe antihistamines, antibiotics, and so on. So here's a couple of minutes just looking at how digestion works, and hopefully be able to fully understand why we really need to slow down and pause to let digestion work properly. So we look at where digestion begins. It actually begins right up in the brain with our eyes and our nose and our ears, smelling, thinking about, seeing and preparing food, which sends signals to our body to stimulate the secretion of gastric juices to start breaking down our food. And then we have chewing. So this is where we break down the food into pieces. And there are so many digestive enzymes in our saliva that they actually start working on and breaking down our food before we even swallow it. So that's why it's really important. People say, how many times should I chew? And there's this golden number of 30 times, which is possibly a little bit excessive, or perhaps a little bit difficult to instigate when you're eating quickly, but certainly chewing until the food tastes like baby food, like mush in your mouth, is important. And then as food reaches our stomach, it continues the breakdown of food, churning it to mix with the stomach acid and all those lovely enzymes to help to break everything down, particularly protein. Protein needs a really nice acidic environment to fully break down so that we can use all that protein from our foods. And also the stomach acid helps to kill bacteria, which can help to, is one of those first lines of defense from different types of infection. So that's a really important environment to prepare before food starts hitting it unannounced. And then food travels along to our small intestine, where digestion really continues, and we start to absorb all the lovely nutrients from all the different food choices that we've taken, and getting that into our bloodstream, ready for our energy and all those vitamins and minerals to start all their different functions around the body. Then it travels to the large intestine, where it absorbs a huge amount of water and prepares for elimination. And at that point, we don't want it sitting around for ages, being really sluggish. So if we're regularly constipated, we want to try and address that, because we want to get all that waste out of the body and not give it the chance to start reabsorbing that back into our bloodstream. That's where we can start to have some problems. I'm just going to finish on that one in a second. Okay, so before we look at ways to move out of our stress state before we eat and aim to optimize our digestive process, we're going to consider the concept of hunger. So have you ever considered that there are different types of hunger? If you sometimes find that you wished you'd eaten less, that you had made a different food choice, that you regularly seek comfort in food, mindful eating might be a really beneficial practice in putting you back in the driver's seat as to what you eat when, how much you eat, how to regulate your portion sizes, and how to savour your nourishing food. So mindful eating is not about depriving you of joy and treats associated with certain foods. It's about removing the autopilot. So do you ever pause before you eat and ask yourself, why are you eating? Are you hungry? So we're going to consider these different aspects of hunger that can lead us to eating and perhaps overeating. So first of all, we think about I hunger. I hunger is that irresistible food that looks delicious. Hunger does not really come into the equation, not hunger in the stomach area. I hunger is really powerful. So you're just waiting in the queue in a coffee shop, waiting for your drink to be prepared, and there's that amazing bank of crispy pastries and cookies and muffins and so on. You had no intention of buying one, or maybe actually you always buy one because they are there and it's a habit. But how often is it actually a conscious decision because you are really hungry? Or does it just look irresistible and delicious? And think about if you serve dishes on the table, which is a really nice thing to do if you're eating socially and you have got some lovely serving dishes and you've got them all out on the table. But then there's that large lasagna that could feed 6, but 4 of you polish it off just because it's there. And you kind of think, seconds, everybody, it's not worth saving. But for those seconds, was anybody actually really hungry? Does that decision have anything to do with hunger? Is it just that I hunger, of just that food is there and it's just irresistible? And this can be aggravated with scrolling on social media. So if, like me, you follow lots of lovely chefs and cooks and nutrition people, you just see endless scrolls of amazing food. And obviously, the more you look at, the more the different platforms will send to you. So you just end up scrolling through amazing looking cakes and pastries and puddings and pies and everything else. And that will then influence your desire to just want to eat those kinds of foods. So it's not about necessarily avoiding delicious looking food, but it's just being conscious of the power of I hunger and what does it actually have to do with real appetite and real hunger. And then the next one is the power of aroma. So many people lost that joy of eating during COVID with a loss of sense of smell, and that really impacts appetite and how much we actually really consciously taste through aroma of food. And think about the emotions that are associated with the smell of a bakery or freshly brewed coffee, chocolate, pizza, walking past your local curry house, and that mouth-watering effect from the smells of cooking. So again, it's just being conscious of that power and that trigger that might just make us go and buy food that we just hadn't planned on buying to eat, don't necessarily need to eat. We're not particularly hungry. We just do it so absent-mindedly and without thinking. And thinking about aroma, when we maybe have a morning cup of tea or coffee, how often do we actually then stop to enjoy that rich aroma or that fragrance of the tea before we actually just glug it down absent-mindedly? So we're actually doing an awful lot that sort of contradicts and conflicts the different taste and smell sensations. Then we come to mouth hunger and the sensation of that first crunch. So the satisfaction of the crispy crunch is so powerful, whether it's crisps or fries or breaded chicken or a donut. It's just the power of that crunch, and food producers and marketing people are so aware of the impact of that power of the crunch on our appetite and how it's so difficult to resist it and so difficult to stop. Or even with the mouth sensation as well is the sort of soothing velvety experience as well from perhaps like a really thick velvety hot chocolate or melting chocolate as well. And that desire then to want more. And if we're not particularly aware that if we're not stopping to enjoy and appreciate that crunch or that velvety, smooth sensation, then our taste sensations are not satisfied and they want more because we didn't really stop to appreciate it at the time. So we go for the refill or we go for the pudding. And that can often result in overeating if we're not careful, if these practices are not done with us being fully aware. And then we come to heart hunger. And this one is really powerful. It's a major influencer in eating. And again, very little to do with needing to fill the hole in the stomach. It's much more about filling a hole somewhere else. So we consider how you feel before eating sometimes and what food you're then reaching for. So this is about making conscious decisions. So after we've had that unhealthy treat to help us to deal with the stressful or negative experience that we've dealt with, if we think back to before we ate that item, how were we feeling? Were we feeling sad or irritated or frustrated or angry? Were we just actually sometimes feeling anxious or bored? Particularly in policing, you're going to have more than the usual number of human experiences of negative exposure in your daily dealings with trauma and anger and violence and often death. So how do you deal with this? So the feedback that I've had from a few of the questionnaires is that we deal with it with comfort eating. And is that conscious or is that subconscious? Is that just our go-to to try and make it and help us feel a little bit better with all of those raw, negative and stressful emotions that you deal with in your different roles? So if you are feeling an emotional need with food, how does it make you feel? Does it work? Are you eating to fuel your body or your emotions? And again, there is absolutely no judgment here whatsoever. It's all about just being conscious of those decisions, because maybe you haven't considered these before. Maybe you haven't realized that these are some different patterns of behavior that you follow. But some of those unhealthy food choices and the sugary snacks that we crave can really risk your levels of fatigue, weight gain, raised blood pressure, as well as adding, if we're stressed, to those gut issues, those uncomfortable gut symptoms as well. And if you are in one or more of these emotional states, then food choices can be led by your eye and nose hunger and your heart hunger, rather than choosing nourishing foods that are going to really support and lift your mood and energy. So what else could help to soothe you in those situations? Where else might you find a positive, calming distraction to help to manage the different situations that you're dealing with at work, to help alleviate the reliance on food for that comfort, so that we actually re-establish some control in our own lives and we focus more on food for nourishment and for energy and for real hunger, and to fuel us in the most effective way for our different physical needs. So when you get home from work, is there an opportunity to get out in fresh air? Can you play some uplifting music? Do you play a musical instrument? Could you spend time with a pet, going out for a dog walk, for example? Or participate in practices like yoga, something relaxing like that? Or is there somebody you can talk to? Are there other practices, if we think back to that like optimal flower and the other different areas of the healthcare, so the stress management and the exercise and the emotional balance and sleep, can we focus a little bit more on some of those areas to reduce the reliance on food and eating and less healthy snacks for comfort? And can we ask ourselves, what does my body actually need? How hungry am I? Do I need a huge plate of food that's going to really stretch my stomach and make me feel uncomfortably full? Or could I actually just be thirsty? Could a soothing hot drink fill that hunger void until my next mealtime? And this is more to do with stomach hunger. So the signals of the rumbling tummy and the hunger hormones being released as well. We actually have that feeling of emptiness in our stomach, which sometimes when we're regulated by the clock to eat at certain times, we don't necessarily have those real empty feelings. We don't often have that opportunity. to feel really empty between meals necessarily. And so what does my body need? Does it need a sugary snack? Does it need a source of protein? Does it need something to help support my mood? Do I need some kind of fiber to encourage those bowel movements and help to reduce my feeling of sluggishness? And then, partway through a meal, could we just do a little check-in? Could you just pause and be aware and conscious and do a little check-in? I've had half my meal. How hungry am I still? And this is to encourage stopping eating when you feel, learning to stop to eat when you feel satisfied before you are overly full. So we're thinking about challenging eating behaviours that have become habits and taking control of our food intake by monitoring our hunger and our appetite levels. Learning to listen to the signals from our own bodies, rather than feeling that we need the security of counting calories to tell us how to eat and how much to eat, or the latest fad diet, and then feeling guilty when we feel we've failed. And just learning to eat in this way, more mindfully and more consciously, can really help with our own weight management, where we read our own body signals, and we are going to be there's going to be less opportunity for mindlessly eating our way through that last slice of cake, or that chocolate bar that you've picked up on autopilot because you're standing in the queue in the garage. So those symptoms that are associated with eating on the go and eating whilst in a state of stress, plus making the food choices whilst unconsciously directed by hunger that doesn't come from your body's hunger signals to re-nourish you, can be addressed with some mindful eating practices. And this should not be a chore. This is not something else to fit into your already over busy day. So let's look at what is mindfulness before we look at mindful eating itself. So one definition describes a keen awareness of an individual's emotions and body without judgment. So this is the opposite to being on autopilot. You know, that scary feeling when you get home from work and don't remember the journey. So this is not about reacting without pausing momentarily to consciously consider your response. That's being mindful. And then leading on from this concept is mindful eating. And this is a state of non-judgmental awareness, shifting one's attention to the food and mind-body connection. It's a state of being open-minded and aware of the taste and the texture and the flavour and the melting and that crunch or the spice or the bitterness and so on. Okay, it's just about being aware of the food that you're about to eat. It's non-judgmental, so it's not attaching any critical thoughts or views. It's not looking at some spinach leaves and thinking, they look disgusting, I hate vegetables. It's just about observing food. And in her book, Mindful Eating on the Go, a lady called Jan Chosen-Bays, she says that mindful eating is remembering to bring a quality of purposeful awareness to the ordinary activities of the life that we're already living. So we're not looking to make great big changes in our practices. We're not fitting in something that's completely new and different and going to disrupt our routine. It's just remembering to pause, to come to the moment during your already existing behaviours. And that remembering that can be the really hard part. When we're flying around multitasking, asking, what does my body need? That can feel like your last priority, but perhaps it does need to be your first, because it will enable you to perform other tasks much more effectively. And in that momentary pause, you identify which of those hunger states you're in when you're looking at the pastries in the coffee shop queue. And then having quietened all those different voices of eye hunger, the draw of the aroma, your mouth salivating at the thought of that lovely crunch, your heart telling you that what you're in need of and what you rightly deserve, your stomach growling because you've got called out on a job midway through your breakfast, and the fear that you might get really hungry if you don't eat right now. And then that inner critic voice saying, but if you succumb, you've failed on your diet again. You just need to take that moment to just quieten all of those signals and messages and make that conscious choice. And if the conscious choice is to buy that pastry to go with your coffee, that's fine. That's your first step to mindful eating. You've made that conscious decision rather than being on autopilot of those two questions. Why am I hungry? What does my body need? Now, I accept that this photo is going to be difficult for you to replicate on a busy Friday late turn in the centre of Birmingham. And mindful eating is not necessarily conducive to those moments, but can you sometimes somehow initiate some stillness to acknowledge that shift from fight or flight, active activity, to rest and digest eating time? Can you tip back those scales, that balance? So let's look at some techniques that link stress management and this non-judgmental awareness of mindful eating and the potential positive impact on your health. So to shift out of the stressed state into rest and digest can just be as simple as pausing. If you realise you're feeling stressed, you just need to consciously take some deep breaths before diving in. As I said, staring and scrolling on your phone at your desk or catching up on all those emails whilst trying to wolf down your sandwich does not constitute mindful eating. It may be a tempting opportunity for catching up, but if you're more focused on that, and some of those emails can increase your stress depending on the content, whilst you're absent-mindedly chomping through either a packet of crisps or a healthy salad, you're still not promoting healthy and effective digestion. So ideally, you're not in the car, you're not standing up, walking around at your desk, though sometimes you have to be. And on those occasions, you accept this is not a mindful meal, allowing your sole focus. You don't have that luxury right now, but nonetheless, you're aware that that is what it is. This is not a mindful meal, but you're aware of that. And you try to make sure you do have the opportunity at some point in your day for a meal where you can sit and focus on that food. So we're taking some deep breaths to start to slow down your heart rate. And that sends messages to your brain. You no longer need cortisol and adrenaline buzzing around, but instead food's coming. So you can switch yourself from one state into the other. You take time to look at your food, to smell it, identify your level of hunger, decide on what your appetite is like before you start. Decide on your ideal portion size to get you to satisfaction. And this will start the digestive process, releasing those digestive hormones, digestive enzymes, your stomach acid that are going to start breaking down your food effectively. And this helps you really get to know your body, your nutritional requirements, puts you in that driving seat in managing your dietary intake. And this is going to really reduce your likelihood of unconscious grazing and overeating. And then as you start to eat your food, it is vital that you chew, okay, that mouthful to mush before you swallow and get everything starting to break down. So chewing effectively forces you to slow down, and this can give important messages to your brain about appetite. So your appetite hormones in your gut take about 20 minutes from eating to register fullness as food starts to empty out of the stomach into your small intestine. And those signals, those appetite signals of hunger or fullness, they give a feedback loop to your brain. So the fullness hormone will start to kick in once it senses food coming out of the stomach into the small intestine, sending a message to your brain that you are full. So if you've shoveled everything down too quickly prior to those hormones getting that message, then it has to play catch up, and you can then become uncomfortably full because your body is still processing food before it can get to those fullness signals. And if chewing is really hard to remember, maybe try getting into the habit of putting your knife and fork down between mouthfuls, or you don't take another bite of your sandwich until you've completely finished the last bite and your mouth is then empty. Little techniques like that can just help you to slow down a little bit. And that can help to reduce the risk of weight gain and obesity as you get back in tune with your hunger and appetite signals. It will help to rebalance your blood sugar, your blood fats, and reduce blood pressure. and we enjoy all those lovely different flavors. We don't need so much food to then actually enjoy the sensations of the smell and the texture and the taste and that melting flavor or that crunch, the different variety of sensations that help us to feel satisfied. If we've done that mindlessly, then again, the body is not satisfied and looks for more. We eat more, but we enjoy it less. And then pause before snacking, before seconds. Does my body need more? Sometimes realizing that you don't necessarily need to have half a packet of biscuits because you're bored or you're seeking comfort or out of habit. We can just look to perhaps slightly recalibrate snacking, and we're consciously making those food choices. Again, if it's a treat, enjoy it. There is no guilt, but it's with full awareness. And finally, as we think back to those responses to your questions at the beginning, thinking about your work environment, how much influence do you have about where you can eat, who you can eat with, how long you can eat for? Can your meal break be a sociable pause in the day? Eating is a very sociable activity. If it can be combined with getting outdoors in the brighter weather in the spring and the summer, it could be an opportunity to increase your exposure to vitamin D during the day, which can be extremely beneficial. So we're looking to find that balance when we are sociably eating with still trying to be mindful. So if you're fully focused on your food, it's going to be hard to focus fully on conversation, but you can get practiced at alternating. So concentrating on the food whilst it's in your mouth, acknowledging those different sensations, and then on your friends, your family, your colleagues, and those sociable conversations between mouthfuls. We're still looking to try and balance the two. And then just parking work for a moment and thinking about food preparation at home and trying to make that a mindful activity sometimes, rather than just that daily grind and that daily chore of having to get something out on the table for however many people. Is it possible just maybe a couple of days a week to initiate trying to see cooking for pleasure? Can you put on your favourite music or an uplifting podcast? Can you recruit other family members or housemates to help? Could there be a rota with helping with all that food preparation and the chopping of fruit and vegetables to help to get those into your daily diet? So for anyone feeling that this all seems a little bit hippie-ish and might feel a bit awkward trying some of these deep breathing techniques and the sensations and the aroma and the taste and so on, particularly in the workplace, my advice to you is to just try it. You can either do this discreetly, or you can try and recruit your other colleagues to get on board with you. Perhaps try it for yourself first, and then if you feel the benefit, maybe it's a message that you want to start spreading. But if you are experiencing stress or any of the common gut symptoms of indigestion, bloating, heartburn, wind associated with stress and rushed eating, really, what have you got to lose? This is free, it's pretty easy, and the evidence is it can be incredibly effective. Plus, there are the additional benefits to other systems beyond digestion. So taking those deep breaths before you dive into your plate of food can help to rebalance mood in two ways. So we're chemically reducing those stress hormones, that cortisol and that adrenaline that keep you feeling agitated. And mentally, by letting go of your stress, triggers that non-judgmental consciousness and mindset. So a gentleman called Patrick Holford is a very popular nutrition science author, and he's a co-founder of the Institute for Optimum Nutrition. He says how you think and feel is directly affected by what you eat. And after this session on mindful eating, I would like to add to that, how you think and feel is also directly affected by how you eat. That links nicely to our next topic in the final webinar, which is food for mood. And that's not going to be until April the 18th. So do make a note in your diary to join us for that one. And I haven't really talked today about specific healthy food choices. This is about raising awareness of the impact of stress and hunger on digestion and on your health, and on effective ways to try to eat to impact your health. And I had a one-to-one client a short while ago who had severe IBS type symptoms. He worked in the city in London. He'd had them for about 30 years. He thought it was just down to the stress of his job, and he lived with these unpleasant gut symptoms for 30 years. We looked at different food intolerances, but we mainly adopted these practices of slowing down meal times, of chewing, of being mindful, of looking at the different colours and textures and smells on the plate. And within 2 weeks, he was experiencing a reduction in his symptoms. After 3 months of working together, they had pretty much gone. So these are such simple techniques, but they can be so effective if we can try somehow to fit them into a busy policing role and lifestyle. If you want a reminder on what those healthy food choices look like, perhaps revisit the food choice recommendations back from webinar 1, Food for Energy, where we talk about better options that don't cause those blood sugar spikes. And also in the meantime, please keep an eye on the Oscar Kilo nutrition pages. There'll be 2 bite-sized videos coming out soon on healthy swaps and on healthy snacks, along with some healthy eating recipes coming in the next month or 2. So thank you very much for listening. It'd be really interesting to share some of your comments. I hope this has been interesting and thought-provoking. If any of the content has triggered some challenging emotions for you, do contact me and I can put you in touch with some resources to try and support you. But having shared those challenges on your time and your space as to how to eat mindfully in the policing workplace, I would love to consider in the next 5-10 minutes some solutions, some problems, some positive problem solving, maybe share some ideas that can help others of finding some opportunities and ways to bring about more effective digestion to support your health in the workplace. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. I've still got problems with my screen, although I think my sound's okay. So I'll just leave my camera off for now. In the comments, we only have one question at the moment. So folks, if there are any questions for the last 10 minutes, feel free to just put them into the chat or stick your hand up and we'll get to them. But there's only one from Dave at the moment, and it goes back to what you've mentioned around chewing to get all the goodness out of your food. So Dave's asking if we have some healthy food and we chew it a lot, we get all the goodness out of it. If we have something that's maybe a little bit more unhealthy and we eat that quickly, will it not be as bad for us?
That's a great question.
Yeah, I loved it.
That's a cop-out. That's a complete cop-out. No.
Nice try though, yeah?
Nice try. No, because we're still going to absorb the bad stuff, unfortunately, from the poor food choices. It won't get through us that quickly that there won't be the healthy impact, I'm afraid, if only.
Yeah, wouldn't that be good?
Yeah.
Any more questions from anyone? Okay, there's a couple of not so much questions, but comments. So Claire said, having easy to eat good protein snacks really helpful, and I know that's something that you've touched on before, Anna, in terms of kind of preparing ahead and having those healthy snacks available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I will share some. So my next little bite-sized video will be on some healthy swaps. And then the next one after that will be healthy snacks. And I will share some recipes as well. It's that always have a good source of protein in them because of the impact of choosing protein over your simple carbohydrate foods that keep you fuller for so much longer and help manage your blood sugar. So yeah, that is really key.
But there's an interesting one here that is an observation in terms of working from home, but going into the office 1 day a week, and gut health being completely different, even though this person's eating exactly the same food. So that would potentially point towards the stress element of it. I don't know, Anna,
That's really interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. Whether the food choices are completely different or whether it is about just eating, like wolfing stuff down on the go, but sort of having a pause to reflect on those 2 different environments would be a really interesting exercise to try and identify why that is the case. whether it is to do with mindset and the stress element, or the food choices, or a combination of the two. But
Yeah,
this does show you how powerful that is, just comparing 2 different days doing the same work, I would imagine, roughly.
Yeah, a question here from Sarah asking if there's any supplements that you would recommend for gut health, or is it just down to good diet?
It's both, really. I always urge you to start with food first. So once you've absolutely nailed the food side of things, and you really still need some support in different areas, then in sort of like a one-to-one clinic environment, we would look at some supplements to perhaps support you short term. But I would recommend, really getting that blood sugar balance regulated first, getting as many vitamins and minerals into your diet through fresh fruit and vegetables and the diversity of those, and your good fiber sources. Excuse me. And once you feel that you've really got that, if you still feel that you need some more support because of the stressful environment that you're in, perhaps, or things that you're dealing with, then things like different probiotics can be really helpful. But again, you can get them naturally in food sources. So probiotics help to feed your gut, help rebalance your gut bacteria population. Prebiotics are the foods that feed your probiotics. So prebiotics are all the different kinds of vegetables, fibrous vegetables, that then feed your gut bugs. And you can increase the population of those and rebalance that with probiotics. And that'll be your fermented type foods, like your sauerkraut, which will be a fresh sauerkraut, not one that's just, unfortunately, just distilled in vinegar, because that can kill off all the good bacteria. But fresh sauerkraut, kefir, which is like a fermented yogurt, natural yogurt as well. Miso paste, which is like a fermented soybean paste, which you can use in different soups and casseroles. They can really help to support your gut. But you want to be getting your gut in a healthy place first before you start shoving all these extra bacteria into your gut, because you can actually exacerbate some of the symptoms. So really getting your diet with wholesome foods, whole grains, and healthy fats first, and then maybe supplementing afterwards if you need to.
Okay, and we have a question around what about the effects in regards to food on fullness when chewing? It wouldn't be easy. So, for example, soup or protein shakes, how can we make them feel a bit more filling?
That is a great question. And certainly with things like smoothies, you can get that blood sugar hit if your smoothie is predominantly made up from fruit. So trying to get some more filling ingredients in there, so maybe like some peanut butter or some vegetables as well as fruits into the smoothie, or some nuts and seeds and so on. But with those that can be eaten much more quickly, like soups as well, it's giving yourself time for that to go through you before you then start thinking, oh, I'm still hungry, I need to have some pudding, or I need to have a massive chunk of bread. It is just allowing time for that to process, to trigger those hunger hormones and the satiety, the fullness hormone, to either say, yeah, we need a little bit more, or thank you, that's now had time to process and we've had enough. But there's no shortcut around that. It is just allowing time for digestion for that. But that's a really good question.
Yeah. Then there's one around alternatives for comfort food. Can wine and chocolate really be matched? And then a bit of a follow-up question from Claire around what's triggering the comfort food aspect of it. What's the need for that? So maybe that's all about the kind of the mindfulness bit that you've touched on as we've gone along today.
Yeah, and so many of us can be in that habit of just needing that little sweet treat at the end of a meal, particularly in the evening. It can be such a time of just wanting and craving that little sweet thing. So maybe just that small square of dark chocolate, and a small glass of wine a couple of nights a week. But it's looking at the portion sizes and the quality of those treat foods, and then enjoying them. So not necessarily having to have a full bar of dairy milk and a bottle of wine. It's about gradually reducing that and switching that to that small square of dark chocolate, which is really beneficial. And it, you know, it can take a while for our taste buds to adjust from the lovely sweet sugary manufactured milk chocolate to that more healthy dark chocolate. It's a lot more rich, so you generally can't eat very much more of it. And then again, looking at the alcohol intake for just that, maybe that's, you know, looking at our glass sizes, and maybe switching to a little glass now and again. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever.
Fabulous, thank you. That's it for questions in the chat. There's a few really lovely comments in terms of what you've delivered today being really helpful. So that's brilliant, Anna. Thank you. So if there's no more questions, we'll leave it at that. Anything you want to finish off with, Anna, before we close?
No, I hope it's been interesting and helpful. And if, you know, people find little solutions that that work in finding time and places, particularly if you're on a crazy response shift and you know it's really difficult to predict when you're going to be able to eat and how. But if people find little solutions, it'd be great to hear those, to share those, so that we can share them amongst the wider policing family and try to help people in dealing with those gut symptoms and you know, those uncomfortable symptoms and the stress of eating that is so common amongst the policing community. Be really great to start trying to address that and spreading the word if there are some solutions out there.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Anna. Thank you to everyone that's joined us today, and hope we'll see you all on the next one in April. Thanks very much.